This is CG Ruthless Sports. I will be brutally honest. Ain't nothing but being brutally honest. Coming at you with another video.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Super Bowl champion, the running back from the University of Florida State from the 1999 draft, running back Dexter Carter. What's up, bro?
Hey, man. What's happening? Good to be with you.
It's good to see you, man. Appreciate it, man. Like, hey, a legend, bro. A guy who did it all. A returner, a running back slash, bro. Man, you were the game changer then, bro.
Hey, man, watching, and I'm surely not comparing myself to McCaffrey, but watching him do what he does.
Oh, I do something.
I tell you what, I probably would have fit better in today's system than the system back then, because I was a punt returner, kick returner, running back. They split me out, and I was fortunate enough to, have touchdowns. Rushing, receiving, punt return, and kick return. So watching McCaffrey, do his thing, getting the ball in his hands and, making an impact in different ways, man. Boy, I'd have loved that being in today's system. But you know what? Hey, we're born in the zip code we're born in. We're born in the year we're born in for a reason. And I tell you what, having the chance to play with the great ones that I had a chance to play with, man, hey, man, I wouldn't change a thing.
Hell yeah, man. It's a great feeling, man. I mean, you played this position before, and it's changed over the years, man. Like, watching a good slash type of running back, but then you catch the ball at the backfield. I mean, you had it all. I mean, you were a first-round draft pick in 1990 out of Florida State, man.
Yeah, man. Man. Again, I was fortunate to, come into Florida State, and I've been fortunate in so many ways. I kind of had to start giving myself a little credit over the years because it seemed like high school, I was a winner. Florida State, I was, played when Dion was there, and my sophomore years when we started that 14-year dynasty where we were never ranked lower than number 3 in the country. My sophomore, junior, senior years, we were ranked 2 in the country twice and 3rd in the country, once. So, and then I come to Florida State, being George Seiffer's first round draft pick, right after they won back-to-back Super Bowls and having the chance to play that first year with Joe Montana before he got hurt, and then Steve Young, and just to play with I think 8 Hall of Famers that I played with, man. I tell you what, man, I feel very, very fortunate that I was just blessed with the ability that I was and feel, like I was a big contributor on, all of those levels of football. So, man, Dexter Carter had a good career, man, based on, performance and just who I had a chance to get on that field with, man. Very, very fortunate.
It should be a great feeling, man, because, I mean, what really convinced you to go to Florida State? I mean, was there, like, other offers besides going to Florida State? Like, was there, like, a couple good schools that were recruiting you, or did you just really felt Florida State was just the team?
Oh, I mean, I was recruited by back then, Alabama recruited me, Georgia Southern back then, Florida State, Florida. There was a lot of schools, but the impact for me was I had never even known who Florida State was. But I asked one of my coaches my junior year. I went to a small school, small town in South Georgia, 3 red lights. But you know what? I got to tell you something about that small town in a second. But um, I told him I wanted to go to a football camp. And about 3 weeks later, at the early part of the summer, he came back with one application. I just knew it was University of Georgia, but it was Florida State. I had never heard of Bobby Bowden. I had never heard of Florida State, but they were about 3 hours away from my home. So I went to camp, and in that camp, it was my first time meeting Coach Bowden. And after that, on that third day of the 3-day camp, Coach Bowden offered me a scholarship. He didn't know who I was. I didn't know who he was before, I was there. In that same camp, we had about 9 kids that he signed from that camp. One of them was Leroy Butler, who just got inducted into the Hall of Fame, played with the Green Bay Packers. And, we both came out the same year. He went to the Packers. I came to the 49ers. But that's how I ended up at Florida State. It was, when my junior year ended, I didn't even know who Florida State was. But once I went to that campus and I went through that camp and saw the campus and all, they had me. So I already knew who I was going to when my senior year started, and I stayed true to that commitment.
Man, that's tight, man. But what was it like to just play with a guy like Deion Sanders in practice, man? It had to be kind of exciting, and then have him as a teammate going into the 94, right?
Yeah. But, we were teammates for 3 years together at Florida State. So when he came to us in 94 for the Super Bowl, I already knew who he was, and I already knew what he was all about. And, he created, prime time, and everyone's heard the story of why and how he created, prime time. But I saw all of that from my sophomore year, well, from my freshman year on, the jury, the work ethic, first one on the practice field, the last one off the practice field, the effort he gave in practice, the flashness, the flamboyant, the confidence, all of that was back in college, and again, we were, fighting for the national championship every year. So we were going against the Miamis with the Michael Irvins, the Vinny Testaverde, the Benny and Brian Blades, the Bubba McDowell, all those great guys we were going up against every single year we played them, and going up against the University of Florida, going up against the SEC teams, LSU, the Auburns. We were tearing them all up. Nebraska's, it didn't really matter. Coach Bowden would go on the road and play all of them, so it wasn't a surprise that we would play and win and play at a high level and be one of the top teams in the country because of the way we practice. We had 2 and 3 deep. When somebody got hurt, somebody filled in. When somebody graduated and left, we just reloaded because we had great players at that time. So what's interesting is when 94, when I knew he was coming to San Francisco and the other players knew it, the only thing the other players knew of what they saw when he was at Atlanta, and they saw what they thought was disruption, arrogancy, anything that you usually don't want in your locker room. But what I told them, I said, guys, one, if you don't play with him, you're probably not going to like him. But if he's on your team, you'll see nobody works harder than him, and you can depend on him on the field. Now, he's going to tell you what he's going to do. He's going to go on the field, and he's going to do it. Most people, we're taught, humbleness and just let your plan speak for yourself. But I said, that's not how Deion is. But I said, once you play with him, you'll enjoy playing with him. And because these guys that came up to me and asked me, now they didn't want him on the team because the 49ers, we won with class, and there was a way in which we did things, and they didn't want to disrupt that. But it's interesting. Once he came and he was there for half the season and whatever, every one of them came back and said, you were right, Dexter. He had Steve Young dancing after, touchdowns. He had Jerry dancing after touchdown, and none of those guys would do that before Deion came. So he changed the flair of what the persona of the 49ers. Not to mention William Floyd came in his rookie year from Florida State too, and he was pretty much like that. Dedrick Dodge was on our team from Florida State. I was the only one that, I was more of in that 49er mode where I didn't talk much. I just let my play do my talking. But Dedrick Dodge, William Floyd, and Deion Sanders, boy, they gave it to you, but they backed it up. So it was awesome.
Oh man, it had to be pretty interesting just to have a guy of his caliber. I mean, it's like a once in a lifetime type player like Deion Sanders. Like, this guy was a game changer. This guy, I mean, he had blazing speed. He even played baseball too, which is ridiculous. Like at that time, he was able to do two sports. But man, I heard like different stories between him and Deion's, like Jerry Rice and Deion Sanders locker room story. Was there like any incidents between those two guys or no?
Before I tell you that, you were talking about, the different sports he played. At
Yeah.
Florida State, he played baseball and ran track. And matter of fact, we were on the same 4x100 meter relay team, one of the top teams in the country. We went to nationals up to Eugene, Oregon. I mean, we had 3 first-round NFL draft picks on the 4x1, and we had one true track guy who was Arthur Blake, who was a 2-time Olympian in the 110 high hurdles. So we had Arthur Blake, the true track guy, Sammy Smith, who was the 9th pick overall to the Dolphins in 88, and then Deion, who was 4 or 5 in 88, and then I was first round pick in 1989. So, I mean, it was awesome. I mean, having a chance to not only play football with him, but, obviously run track. But what I liked about Deion and Jerry in practice, how usually the first team offense go on the field. Then the scout team would come on. But every time Jerry stepped on that field with first team offense, Deion said, I got this. He guarded him every time that year in practice. So it was some shows, man, in practice. Some competitiveness going on. Jerry didn't need that in front of him to go 100% every single play, but that was how Deion was. Deion was that way at Florida State, and he was no different, when he came to the 49ers. So, yeah, it was some good battles. But as far as locker room, Jerry was one of those guys that was unsure about Deion coming because of the disruption he thought the brashness would bring to the locker room. But once he got there and he realized how hard Deion worked, there was no issues. There was only an issue when we went to the Super Bowl and we were in Miami. And, Super Bowl is no different than any other game, even though you're at that location for a whole week. It's all business, I mean, strictly business. But Deion made it clear, you know what? Hey, when it's time to practice and when it's time to meet and football stuff, I'm all in. But when it's not football time, I am going to be prime time. And that means all lights are on Deion, and he was going to give them what they wanted. So Jerry did have a problem with that and made it known. So there was some conversation that had to be made between them and some referees getting in between, a little bit, because Jerry only knew one way how to do it when it come to preparing for the Super Bowl. But Deion figured, how can we work hard to get to this point and not enjoy ourselves while we're here? So, but hey, we won the game, so it didn't impact us negatively.
I mean, like, it was a different type of culture. Like you said, they didn't have a player of Deion at the time, and getting him was like a game changer. Like, getting him in free agency was by far the best pickup in any era. Like, before then, you had the Reggie Whites of the world who left in free agency and made a difference for a team like Green Bay. But getting a Deion Sanders, you don't get those often. So when the Niners had the opportunity to get him, he became Defensive Player of the Year. And
absolutely. Sure did in 1 year, and made the impact that we brought him there to make. Hey, all you need to do, hey, Deion, you play that half of the field and you take their best guy and we good. And he did it. So that's the thing. He's done it on every level because he prepared. He watched film. He studied film. If you had a camera on the planes, when we were traveling, oh, Dion had his own device where he watched film religiously. So he knew receivers inside and out, and so it gave him an advantage with his talent. Plus, he studied those guys. So that's why he felt like, you know what, man, we're winning. We should enjoy ourselves while we're doing it.
Oh yeah, when you're winning, it shouldn't matter. But for having him like that, man, it just feels great to have the edge because during that time, you guys had a hard time beating the Dallas Cowboys because the Dallas Cowboys were dominating you guys for quite some time, and it was frustrating because they've run you guys from conference after conference. But then when you guys got Deion Sanders, that was a wrap.
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking about, what was it, 92, 93, 94. 95. I mean, we literally played them 4 times straight in the NFC Championship game. I believe it was 4, 3
Yeah,
times, and they beat us. If it was 3, they beat us 2 out of 3. If it was 4, they beat us 3 out of 4. So we needed a secret weapon to do what we didn't have enough talent to do, which was, stop Michael Irvin, Harper, from making those big plays. Jay Novacek's, he didn't cover all those guys, but he surely did what we needed him to do against Michael Irvin and Harper.
oh man, dude, it was a tough time because when you had to deal with the likes of Michael Irvin and Emmitt Smith and guys like Alvin Harper, I mean, Troy Aikman was very efficient as a passer,
Yep.
and I get that he doesn't put up the flash stat, but when it came to being accurate and all that stuff, Aikman was just at another level. But when you
No
guys
doubt.
were playing. But then when Steve Young became his own guy, it took him some time. But what really stood out about Steve Young was he was able to move outside the pocket a little bit. He was very mobile and he had the lead passing titles. I mean, this guy was something. Like when the Niners got him in a trade before, like there was that quarterback controversial at one point that kind of led between him and Montana go at each other. And it kind of just seemed like at the time people were wondering why we didn't keep Montana. But when you guys had Steve Young as your quarterback, how'd you felt about him?
Well, to go back to Joe initially, my rookie year, they just came off of back-to-back Super Bowl wins. And then Joe came right into that 1990 season, leading the team. Nobody had any issues. There was no quarterback competition. And then in the NFC Championship game against the Giants is when Joe got hurt. And then that's when Steve came in, and Steve quickly acclimated to the role, and we were winning. And when Joe did come back, I remember I got a real lesson in the real meaning for NFL, not for long. And the reason I say that is because we got the, Super Bowl winning this quarterback in Joe Montana that is healthy and was coming back and could have began practice, but Steve had got into his role. And I remember Joe was healthy, but he couldn't practice with us. And I couldn't understand it. Joe is healthy, but he can't practice with us. He used to practice when we were done. He used to go out and throw it, and Jerry would stay behind and throw with him. And then I found out that technically he could have practiced with us, but Steve, if you remember, Steve had waited a long time to get into that position. And Steve didn't like to look over his shoulder, because he finally got his opportunity. And Steve didn't want Joe in practice with us because he didn't want to have to look over his shoulders because he had been told the job was his. So that's when I realized that it was the end of the road for Joe with us. And that's why he ended up being traded, because some people can play and have guys behind them compete against them, but Steve made it clear to Coach Seifert that if he's the guy, he'd rather not, have Joe on the field. So you need to do something, with him. It's either him or me. And as you see, Kansas City traded for him. So, I mean, I won my Super Bowl with Steve. I love Steve, and Steve's a great player, Hall of Fame player. I'm glad I played with him, but man, when you have a chance to play with Joe after what Joe had done, and you're a young player like I was, man, it was something immeasurable. It was just immeasurable. I hate that situation had to occur, but they both were there before I got there, so I think the writing was on the wall. Joe getting hurt kind of expedited Steve moving in to that starting role, but inevitably it was going to happen eventually. I just don't know how soon it would have happened, but I feel bad, because no player should lose his position from injury, especially when you had done what Joe had done. But it is what it is. You move on. I'm just happy I have a chance to play with both of them.
Man, it just had to be great to play with those two guys. I mean, Joe Montana was probably like a laid back, chill dude, right? But then Steve Young was more of that excitement dude, right?
What's interesting? I guess you can look at it as excitement, or just look at it as, he was just more of a runner, which kind of was exciting at times. But the way I look at it from a meeting perspective. Like in meetings, Joe was kind of relaxed and he paid attention, but I remember he's the first guy I ever heard in meetings. He would eat sunflower seeds, but he would eat everything. The seeds, you know me, I eat sunflower seeds, but I crack it open, eat the seeds, and spit out, the covering. Oh no, Joe eats it everything, but that's him in meetings. He would do that. Steve, but he would be midway to the back, as I remember. Steve would be in the front row, his lawyer type books out, spread out. We all had our books, but Steve would be totally focused, quiet, and he would have that little hair hanging down, and he'll just be looking, and he'll be intently listening, and he'll be rolling that, while Joe is back there, pretty much taking it all in, but kind of, that kid that you like to party with, that, so it was kind of interesting, just both of them had different personalities, but knowing that Steve was that attorney dude, that was just who he was on and off the field. And Joe was just lighthearted, go out. He was all business, but he kept things light, kept things light.
Oh, man. Yeah, it had to be good to know what the difference were, but what was it like to just share the backfield with Roger Craig? I mean, I know in your rookie year, you did play with Roger Craig, right?
Yeah. Roger, I came in as a rookie. I was about fourth or fifth on the depth chart. By the time training camp ended, just like at Florida State, I was deep on the depth chart. But what happens is, my work ethic, my ability, by the time the season started in college and the NFL, I had already worked my way up to second team behind Sammy Smith, who was a year ahead of me. And he was the Heisman hopeful every year. 6'2", 230 pounds, running, with the anchor guy on our 4x100 meter relay team so he can run. So I was his backup for the first 3 years of my college career. Then he went NFL, and I had my last year by myself. But it was the same way when I came in and worked my way up right behind Roger. Well, Roger was very open. If I had any questions, he would answer them. He would, show me different things. I mean, he wasn't that guy who was scared to, help a younger player. So I backed him up, and I ended up leading the team in rushing as a rookie. And what happened is about game 6, Roger got hurt, and I moved into the starting lineup. And my first game starting was Monday Night Football against the Rams. And I had 13 carries for 124 yards and scored my first touchdown. So, for about 5, 6 games, maybe 7, I started until Roger came back, the latter part of the season. But you know what? He was a great guy. He helped me along. And, I learned something else that year. I remember I said earlier, I learned from Joe and Steve and how we got rid of Joe, and made me realize, man, dang, this dude done won 2 Super Bowls. They get rid of him. So I had to be ready, because you don't know how long you're going to play. Well, after my first year, I hate that it happened, but they traded Roger. It was to the Raiders or to Minnesota, one of them. And then we ended up drafting Ricky Waters, but he was hurt his first year. Then we drafted Amp Lee the next year. So at 5'9", 170 pounds, they didn't draft me to be a starter. But what they realized is my work ethic, my ability to run. I was able to be second team and start and lead the team in rushing my rookie year. But they knew at 170 pounds, they were never going to let me be the guy. So that's why they brought in Ricky Waters in my second year, but he didn't play till the next year. And then Amp, but I became, the punt and kick returner, which I ended up in 1996, which was the 50th anniversary of the 49ers, where they voted a 50th anniversary all-time team. They actually, the media, the organization, and the fans actually voted me on the all-time team as kick return guy. So John Taylor was the punt return guy, even though my punt return average at 9.5, is better than his. So, but anyway, I was proud of my kick and punt return, duties at San Francisco and what I was able to accomplish. So, but to answer your question, Roger Craig was a great guy, man, and he treated me very, very fairly.
I mean, most players would just not want to have a young guy take their job. They probably would just say, nah, I'm not going to help you. But for a guy like Roger Craig, I can tell you what, he was one of the most humble person, even as a fan, just meeting this guy also. I mean, he treated like everybody else, like just everybody else. But some players, man, they take it for granted. But meeting Roger Craig, man, I'll tell you what, one of the nicest persons I met by far. Like, he treats you like family.
No doubt about it. I hadn't seen him in years, literally, man, 20 years or so. But he and I did an autograph signing in Fresno about 2 months ago. And, it was great seeing him. Looked like he could still play. And, I think it's long overdue for him to be, not only considered for the Hall of Fame, but, man, he should be in the Hall of Fame. To be the first guy to go 1,000 in one season. When you see, Marshall Faulk do what he did, when you see, Christian McCaffrey do what he does, man, that was Roger Craig. And Roger Craig did it at fullback and tailback, made the Pro Bowl at fullback. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the guy is long overdue for the Hall of Fame. So I'm really hoping here in the very, very near future that he gets in, because the longer it goes, man, the harder it is to get in.
Yeah, he's been passed on a lot of times, but I thought when you look at the accomplishment, he was the first back to ever do what you just said, went for 1,000 yards receiving and 1,000 yards rushing. And then the guy's won 3 Super Bowls as a starter in this league, and he's actually led the lead in rush. I think he was in the lead MVP in 1988 in that discussion. But that guy was electrifying. The guy did it all. And you don't get these kind of players often, but like you said, the guy deserves to be a Hall of Famer. It's just it's a joke that a guy like him has not got in. I mean, you would think, hey, this guy was a part of a Super Bowl champion. This guy should have already been in already.
Absolutely. So, you know what, let's keep our fingers crossed for him, and hopefully it happens, sooner than later.
Yeah, man. So when you look back at your career, man, like you got drafted as a first round pick guy, were you kind of surprised that you were just highly that drafted, or was it be based by your season at Florida State?
You know what? Believe it or not, as I said, I was back up to Sam Smith for 3 straight years. Now, in those years, I played. I averaged 5 yards a carry at Florida State, and had over 1,800 yards rushing, with 3 of those 4 years being behind Sammy. And I played as a true freshman. Didn't play a lot. I was the second team running back, but I didn't, you know. Run the ball a whole lot, but I was a starting kickoff returner. Nonetheless, my sophomore year, I had 800 and some yards rushing. My junior year, I had 600 and something. And then went into my sophomore year and I had like 600 and something. So when the season ended, we ended number 2 in the country. I was the only that year. Miami Hurricanes had the number 1 defense in the country, and they won the national championship, although we beat them. But unfortunately, the first game of the season, we were preseason number 2 or 3, but first game of the season, we lost to Southern Miss, who we did not know who in the heck Brett Favre was, but Brett Favre surprised us in that first game, and they beat us. And then the second game, Clemson beat us at home. So we had to have one of those come to Jesus talks like we had in 93, I believe, where I think we were 2-4, 1-3, or something like that. And Eddie DeBartolo made a trip from Ohio and had a talk with us and said, "Hey, is there anything you guys need that you don't have?" We said, "No, we got everything." Then he said, "Then there's no need for y'all to be what the record y'all are." And we turned that thing around. Well, it was the same way at Florida State. We lost the first 2 games and then came back and killed everybody. And I was the only team that year to run for 100 yards against the University of Miami. So I said all that to say the NFL, they do their due diligence. And remember, there's Carmen Policy and John McVay. Both had been executives of the year, won back-to-back Super Bowls, had won 4 Super Bowls up to that point. So they do their due diligence on who they draft. So what happened is when the season ended, I believe I was projected 3rd through 5th round draft pick. Now, nobody told me that. That's just what I believe. But what occurred was I ended up going to the Senior Bowl, and I ended up getting most outstanding offensive player for the South team. I had 8 carries for 64 yards, had some receptions, had some kickoff return. That week in practice was the most important thing because the executives and scouts were there. I killed it. My head coach was Buddy Ryan. We played against Marty Schottenheimer's team. And the difference between the 2 teams, which helped me, is that Marty Schottenheimer didn't hit a lot in practice with his team. With Buddy Ryan, we hit every day. We blocked every day. And that gave me a chance to show the scouts that at 170 pounds that I could block, because they taught me at Florida State, I blocked linebackers, I blocked DNs. And I showed my breakaway speed in practice that whole week. I was breaking long runs, all over the place. And then once the game ended and I had that success, that projected me higher. Then I went to the combine and ran a 4.3, vertical jump 38, killed all the drills. So all of a sudden, Dave Meggett, who came out the year before me, teams started to see a glimpse of Dave Meggett, even though I was probably 25, 30 pounds lighter than Dave Meggett. But nonetheless, I talked to a few teams. Chuck Noll loved me, but he said, "Man, we pounded too much. It wouldn't really fit our system." The Giants were the same way. I wouldn't fit them. But San Francisco told me, if you're available when we get you at 25, or when we get to 25, we're going to draft you. Teams say that a lot. So you don't know who's telling you the truth or not. But, they sent me the hat in the mail. I had the hat. 25 came up and they said, the defending back-to-back Super Bowl champions at number 25 select Dexter Carter. So they were true to their word. So yeah, I had some idea, but you never know until it happens. And again, they drafted me and they told me they weren't drafting me to be the heir apparent to Roger Craig. So a lot of people say, oh, he didn't do this, he didn't get these yards and whatever. Well, that's not what they drafted me for. They that point they had every other position that they needed, so in reality they were looking for somebody to be, their kick and punt return guy, and fill in at running back sometimes. I ended up returning kicks my first year, and then 2.5, 3 years later, I took over punt return for John Taylor, but I still averaged 4 yards a carry at running back, 9.5 on punt returns, and almost 22 on kick returns, and scored touchdowns on punt returns, kick returns, rushing and receiving. So, my message to all the people that say, he didn't, live up to his whatever, you know what? I exceeded what the 49ers drafted me for. Matter of fact, I got that Super Bowl ring, but I also got a ring that means even more to me because I got it on my own. And that was that all-time team ring that I got from what they drafted me for, which was to be a return guy. So at 170 pounds, I wasn't supposed to play as long as I did based on what people's expectations were. So I am very, very fortunate. But there are sometimes you got to start patting yourself on the back and realize that the hard work and the accomplishments that were made was because not from just my NFL career, but from Pop Warner through high school to Florida State. You know what? I exceeded everybody's expectations and was the epitome of what an overachiever is. So you know what? I'm proud of the career I had.
Yeah, I mean, I get that they get over too hype on these draft status. I get it, but you were just there just to be an extra piece. Like you were a contributor. Like when they needed you to return the kicks, man, you were the guy to do it. I mean, a change of pace back. Like, and you said you were 170 pounds, so it's like not a lot of running backs at that weight take a lot of the carries. So it's like you were just like a dynamic player. So like they would use you in different ways, and that's what makes the Niners so unique. Was they didn't need to have a lot of other needs, so they just added an extra skill set like you.
Right. That's why if it was today. See, back then, I remember when Mike Shanahan was our offensive coordinator. Cal was about 10 or 9 running around the field being our ball boy. But it's interesting watching him today. If I would have played in his system or if I played in the New Orleans system with Kamara, man, I know it's hard to say what if, but when you can create mixed matches, with linebackers and safeties, because the 49ers didn't do that. They didn't create mixed matches. It was, hey, we're running the West Coast offense. Now we'll put you out on a man route against a linebacker and all that stuff. So I caught the ball, but it wasn't quite what they do today. It's just a different method of calling plays. But it would have been awesome, in a system today. But so what I do now, I just live through, my kids, man, and I got 2 of my boys still playing football, and one's doing basketball and running track. So I just live, through them.
I mean, life after football has to be great. Still living with, hey, I'm a defending I'm a Super Bowl champion. I've accomplished whatever was needed to do. I mean, does your son play football in college yet or no?
Well, Dexter Jr. actually is. He just turned 25. He played receiver at Georgia Southern. He actually is in a transfer portal right now because he came out the same year Lamar Jackson did, and Lamar played in Florida and Dexter Jr. played in Florida. And in 2015, Lamar was the 31st top player in the state of Florida, where Dexter Jr. was 32. And Calvin Ridley, who's with the Falcons, was like 41. Derwin James was number 1. So that just goes to show you the talent that was in that class. And Dexter Jr. was right up there. He had offers from TCU, Louisville, Auburn, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Virginia. I mean, a lot of schools. He ended up at Georgia Southern because the one thing that, and I learned from that situation, on how I'm handling my 16 and my 14-year-old. Because when you have a dad who has played and he played at a specific school, a lot of schools won't recruit you, or they recruit you and offer you kind of skeptically because, oh, he's going to go to Florida State because his dad went there. Well, fortunately, these other teams did offer, and they were right about Dexter. Dexter did want to go to Florida State. Well, I coached at Florida State from 2007 to 2009. I was on Coach Bowers' last staff. I was the running backs coach. And Jimbo Fisher was on that staff, and he became the head coach. Well, Dexter's junior year, Jimbo Fisher, actually, we went up to a game his junior year, and he had all these other Power 5 offers. And Jimbo told him, Jimbo said, hey, I'm going to get you here, I promise. And when you tell a legacy kid that, they don't intentionally do it, but they just do all they know how, which is he knew he wanted to go to Florida State. He appreciated all the other offers, but he kind of mentally locked out of these other teams. And Jimbo never offered, which really hurt him, because these other teams, he sat and he waited on that offer. And, when a team offers, and see, a lot of athletes need to know when they offer you, they offer 4 or 5 just like you. And usually whoever jumps in first, they take that slot, because usually they may have 3 spots for a receiver, 1 for a running back, 1 for a quarterback. You know what I'm saying? 4 for linebacker. Yeah. Well, that's what happens. They started jumping in and taking those slots, and Dexter wasn't worried about it because Dexter's like, oh, Florida State's going to offer me. And Jimbo never did. You can only ask him why he never did, but it hurt him. So he ended up at Georgia Southern. But nonetheless, he got redshirted. He had a medical hardship, and he took advantage of the COVID year. So that's how he got to year 7. So, he'll go to pro day, this year and let the scouts see him and let the chips fall where they may. I think he's good enough to play on the next level. So we'll see. Now, my 15-year-old, he just turned 16. He's in the 9th grade, and he this summer he was offered by South Carolina, Arkansas, Nebraska, and Florida State. He was offered at DB by South Carolina, receiver Arkansas and Nebraska, and as an athlete with Florida State. So as a freshman, he's going to have many, many more offers that are coming his way. He's ranked the number 7th receiver in the country in the class of 2026. So there's a lot of good things, man. He's 6 feet. He is really, really talented. He scored a receiving touchdown in every game. He plays on the number 1 AAA team in the state of Georgia. We're ranked number 46 in the country. So he's doing very, very well, man. I'm proud of him. So, I'm proud of my 14-year-old too. He's doing his thing in basketball. So, but the 2 football players, we'll see where the road leads them, and hopefully the road leads my basketball player to the NBA one day.
Yeah, they gotta have they gotta have the DNA, man. Like you were successful, for example. I mean, you've done it all. I mean, it'd be great to have another generation follow in the footsteps, but do it in their own ways, because sometimes being under that pressure of somebody's legacy it can be like double pressure for them, right?
Absolutely, and and I understand that. That's why I didn't force them to play. I introduced all the sports to every one of them. Every one of them played every sport. Trike, basketball, baseball, and then they gravitate to the one that they want to play, but the 2 oldest one, football was in them, and they're very, very good at it. So we'll see, exactly what happened. My job was to, if they want to play it, my job is to coach and introduce them, train them, and make sure that they learn the nuances of the game, train them in the way to quick feet, the ability to catch the ball, just how to play the game. And they've done a very, very good job of listening. And this year is so awesome because it's the first time that I've stepped back and not coached one of my kids. So, but I got them with a great group of, the ones that are playing, the freshmen. He's got a great group of coaches at Cedar Grove. You know, everybody who knows football in the state of Georgia and around the country knows Cedar Grove Saints. They won the last 5 out of 7 state championships. Right now on this team here, my 16-year-old, my freshman goes against Ken Lee, who's an Ohio State commit at corner. His inside receiver is a Nebraska commit. Another one is a UConn commit. Defensive end is a Louisville commit. Linebacker is a Louisville commit. The quarterback's a sophomore and already offered by Arkansas. I mean, so there's some talented players on this team, my man. And so I'm glad he's got a great group of players and a great group of coaches, that can be a part of his journey now.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. But then you got that little thought, man, like, hey, Deion Sanders is coaching at a good program too. He's turning around Jackson State program. What was it, just your reaction when you found out he became the head coach there?
That wasn't a surprise to me because, I'd known that he coached high school and was very, very good at it. And I had watched him coach, so I know the method in which he coaches because, I've coached. So, I mean, one thing you do, you got to love your kids and you got to make them accountable and you got to make them work. You got to have a system, that fits them and a great group of assistant coaches, that can run the show with you. Well, when he got the college job, I personally thought, he should have had an opportunity. Now, I love Coach Norville, so I'm not saying that he should have got it over Coach Norville because that's not my deal. But I do know that Deion, I believe the success he's having at Jackson State, I believe he'd have had at Florida State also. But Florida State's having great success under Norville. They're coming along. So so Deion's a good coach. The way I say when it comes to coaches and recruiting my kids, at this point, Deion knows about my kid. All these other coaches know about my kid. It's their deal to offer him if they choose to. As a freshman, usually freshmen don't get offered. He's already got some offers, and they're all Power 5. So I'm fortunate and thankful that he's got those offers. And I'm also a believer that in this sense, he doesn't know where he's going to go. And I told him, hey, you got 3 years. You take it all in, then you make your decision then. Florida State was your dad's journey. Now, if it ends up being yours, wonderful. But if not, then it's got to be yours. It's not mine. So those who jump in first, to me, if it were myself and I was being recruited, I think, those teams that offer you because they see the potential and they believe that you're going to develop into something even greater than what you are, enough to play with them. To me, I think in the end, that should speak volumes, on, a team being committed to you. So that doesn't mean a team that offers later won't have a chance. That's just me talking, but teams are different. Some teams like Kirby Smart, said, we don't offer freshmen very often. Now they've offered about 2026 kids, but nonetheless, that's what he said. And some teams aren't going to offer until later on, but we're patient. We'll see. Deion may offer. Deion be at Jackson State much longer. We don't know. We'll see.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely see. I mean, there's just a lot of guys you played with that were your teammates and been head coaches before, like Tim McDonald, for example. This guy was a head coach in a high school, became a DB. I mean, he's done it all. I don't know what he's been up to lately, but I know he was a head coach for a while at Edison High School when I played against him.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. I'm sure through the recruiting process, I learned about coaches that are players that I played with and played against that, that can see the DNA and can see the potential and may offer him, on his production already. And then uh, once they look at me or find out who his dad is, that's just, in my opinion, just an added bonus, because I think it does matter. Every kid's dad don't have to have played ball, but if you find one that did play ball at a high level, that his dad has groomed him in the right way to position himself for the opportunity. Because I know I sure did.
Oh yeah, like if you succeeded them and they got to be where they're at, they're gonna look under that radar and say, "Well, that's his son, and he's trained him pretty well. Let's take a look at him." That's just how they want to look at the best talent out there. But speaking, just a couple more questions before we end the show, man. But I guess there's a couple good questions from my boy Brian Cope. Huge shout out to him. What was the biggest rival game that you were involved with?
In college or the NFL?
It could be both.
With college was definitely University of Miami. University of Miami, without question. That game every year decided whether we were gonna be in a position to win a national championship or not. And unfortunately, they got us 3 out of 4 years. And then the year that we did get them, they ended up still winning the national championship. So, but hey, that was one of those teams that if we looked in the mirror or when we played them, it was like looking into the mirror, because those guys were competitive just like us. They had that swagger. We had that swag. And man, we knew it was going to be a dogfight when we played each other. And the NFL back then, when it was the old NFC West and it was 49ers, Seattle, the Saints, the Falcons were in the NFC West too. But the Saints, the Rams were a rivalry. I mean, it was a fight back then too. But man, the Saints, anytime you played the Saints and you played those 4 linebackers, and my mind goes blank. Ricky Jackson, Sam Mills. Man, who were those other 2?
Patrick Swilling or something.
Yeah.
I forget his name.
Patrick Swilling, and then Hall of Famer.
He was that one dude with the last name with Vaughn or something.
Yes, man. Man, hey, boy, anytime you played them, it was a battle. So I would say the Saints in the NFL, and I would parentheses the Rams. But college, it was definitely University of Miami.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, man. Like it was a rivalry. Like you guys still play rivalry to this day. So it's like you guys, it's one of the most interesting rivalries in college football. Like at the time, like I've actually got a chance to interview the likes of guys like Mike Rump, who was currently the DB coach at Miami at one point. But I think he's doing scouting now. But he's a good friend of the show too, man. Like it's good that you guys have been successful outside of football. So it's like it had to be a very tough transition, but you got used to that. Hey, you don't have to play it no more.
And you know what's interesting is kind of to bring in the tail end of the whole story. 2 things. One, yes, we former athletes, and I can only speak for myself, you introduce to your kids, you train them up in the way that they want to go, and you groom them. Well, I've also talked to my kids about the true, student meaning of student athlete, because I have a master's in business management. I have a bachelor's degree in early childhood development. And I got my master's after the NFL. And the one thing that I've learned is one, my kids know the importance of education. But what's interesting is I'm 55 years old today. I mean, not today. I'm 55 years old, as of last month. And I know we all, when we retire, we have probably more similar transitions than we want to discuss or talk about. But I know for myself, it was a difficult transition because one, from Pop Warner to the NFL is all you've known. And now it's not all I am, but it's what people perceive me of, which means once the game is over, I went back and got a master's degree. But what I learned is, whether it's family or whether it's friends or whether it's prospective employers, um, for me, people felt I didn't want to work, need to work, or have to work. So what I had, I mean, I went to interview for jobs, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. And it was very difficult to get the attention of the interviewer because they couldn't understand, why do you want to work? You know, they either think you're broke but they just couldn't understand. But it doesn't really matter if I have the education and, and I want to work. I'm not asking to give me that job up here. Let me earn a job. You know what I'm saying? But I'm gonna tell you, and it created, a time period of depression for me, because not only, nobody would take me serious because they couldn't understand why I wanted to work, but the first 7 years I was out of the NFL, I had 17 knee surgeries. I had a knee replacement by the age of 35. So I was having a knee surgery every single year related from football. So not only am I trying to work, wanting to work, but I was going through medical issues that, in the medical, it's different than now. The collective bargaining agreement, I know that's another topic, but, collective bargaining agreement back then, it didn't have us in mind post NFL, medical, and all of that stuff, because all those surgeries had to come out of my pocket, and it didn't come from Cobra either, where, you got the NFL insurance from the NFL. So, it's just a whole lot of things that people wonder why, NFL, former NFL players have a transition issue or challenge. Is because, what, there's a social, emotional, psychological, financial transition that nobody can help you through, and you got to figure out a way to get through it. And I thank God that, one, the path wasn't easy and it was challenging, but you know what? I'm where I am today, and I'm thankful. And and that's why I am preparing my kids, if the opportunity comes and they can play, past college, I'm going to make sure that they're well prepared, when the game does end.
Yeah, gotta have a plan B, because after football, it's not for long. So so you had to go through those adjustments after football, because they'd probably be wondering, why would you want to get a job here? And in some resumes, when they look at resumes, if they saw your resume as an NFL player, they're gonna say he's overqualified.
Yep. I started taking it off my resume. Because it was more of a detriment than a added positive.
Yeah,
So
because they're looking at you and say, why is a former pro football player coming for a job? Like they would say, dude, you're too qualified.
right. And partly they were right in the sense of, there's things you learn working with a team all your life, that, from teamwork, accountability, responsibility, understanding your role and how your role fits with the piece of the puzzle, and how quickly you can transition and use those tools in the real world. And some people, just being honest, some people are afraid of the ascending of an athlete in an organization or a corporation based on those skills, because us, hey, we fight through adversity in a game, and learn on the run, and can transition mid-step based on what we need to do to succeed, and we can do it in the business world. So sometimes the person that's hiring you, you know may, in my experience, may think that his boss, who understand the true ability of somebody ascending through an organization, might see that talent and surpass them. Now, again, I can't speak for anybody else. That's my experience, but it is what it is, you know, I'm glad, the life that I've had and, um, but there's always life after athletics and it still is today at 55, still moving on and just trying to be the best that I can.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. So one more question, and then we'll end it from here. Another question from Brian: what team did you want to play in the Super Bowl? Like, okay, outside of the Chargers, like let's say you guys were like always contenders, right? But what was that one AFC team you wanted to play in the Super Bowl?
Man, believe it or not, I never had if I can go back or somebody, and I can't remember at this moment, and somebody actually um, told me who was in the AFC Championship games during those years, I might could tell you, but I can't remember who was in those AFC games to go to the Super Bowl to play us. So it's kind of hard to really pick anybody, but um, yeah, it's hard to tell.
Oh, you had the Buffalo Bills of the world. They were like always contending every year during those early '90s, and then you had like I think there was like before then, Chargers were kind of like in the mix, but they were like a wild card. But I think you had the Buffalo Bills of the world, and then
yeah,
you had like,
yeah,
and I think,
and what's interesting is I'm gonna change the question around. I never looked to say, "Oh, I want to play them." I always assumed it would be the Bills because back then, they were winning all the time. So it was an assumption that it would most likely be the Bills. So from that perspective, I always thought, first half of my career that I thought it would be the Bills. Later on, I thought it would be Pittsburgh or the Red, Pittsburgh or what other AFC team?
the Chiefs.
You know what? The Chiefs, right? Exactly right. I thought when Joe went to Kansas City, I knew that would be a positive move for them, and I thought that would have been the most awesome game is to play them in the Super Bowl. But what I did learn that 91, I believe, when Joe went to Kansas City, and we played at Kansas City and they beat us. That's the loudest outdoor stadium that I've ever played in the NFL. It was just a big game because Joe was there and we were playing them and it was loud as heck, man.
Oh yeah, like going to Arrow. Like now they got the stadium called Arrowhead, and it's all loud too. But
But well, believe it or not, it was Arrowhead back then.
yeah, it was loud. Like they had
Yeah.
the loudest stadium. But then now you go into Seattle, now they're considered a loud stadium also. I mean, I don't know, like if you had a chance to play at that stadium at the time, they probably had what is it like Husky Stadium or Kingdom
No,
before?
they had the Carrier Dome. No.
Oh,
Carrier Dome was in New York. They had oh man, I just said the name yesterday. I was talking to somebody. But they had a
Husky Stadium.
dome. They had a dome. It started with S. A dome there in Seattle.
Yeah, I think they had one the original called the Kingdom or something.
Yeah, but there was a word right in front of it. The something kingdom. Yeah.
Yeah, one or the other. But yeah, it's like I mean, I'm pretty sure when you had a chance to play in loud stadiums, you would say Kansas City was by far the loudest, right?
Oh yeah. Again, it was had to be because it was Joe's game against us, but it was absolutely loud.
Yeah, without a doubt. And they're pretty loud at it. So it's like, so when you look back at your NFL career, man, you can just say, was there like a lot more opportunities you wish you could have had, or you're just happy of where you're at?
Um, no, of course. Everybody's got things that they wish. Of course, I wish I'd have had, my second or third year in the league, the Houston Oilers had Givens and they ran what is it called they ran this offense similar. It was a throwing offense. Warren Moon's the quarterback, and they spread you out, and their slots were similar to my size. Well, they actually and I still got the news article today. They wanted to trade a first round pick to the 49ers for me, and they wanted me to play in that slot because they were throwing for a lot of yards, and I've played running back since Pop Warner on up. I've never played receiver. Now I did get split out lots of times to play. It was just a running back being split out. It wasn't like specifically a receiver position. So I didn't feel comfortable out there, to be a receiver. But I'd have went if they'd have traded me because I wouldn't have had a choice. But the 49ers didn't want to do it, and they didn't do it. And sometimes I wonder if that would have happened, maybe I would have reached my maximum capable ability to be productive, because in the 49ers offense, I would have always been stuck in that return, kick and punt return, and a running back, getting in the backfield every now and then. But if I'd have been able to, maybe go to Houston, who knows? I mean, I could have had 1,000 yards receiving based on how they wanted to use me, So I think back about that possibility, and then look at and see the way guys are being used at my size today, because at 170, you got to have a coach that knows how to use you. Did I have a productive career at San Francisco? Yes. But as far as to maximize my productivity, they would have had to move me around specifically a lot and put me in the game to be able to reach, the max of what I could have done. So yes, I do think about that.
I mean, yeah, it's always okay to think of what could have been, but you just look back and say, hey, I had a great NFL career. Whatever people think of me, I just look at it like, hey, I got to be a Super Bowl champion. I got to be around great players. And, it's something you could pat yourself in the back and say, hey, not everybody can say they played long, because you said at your size, at 170, not most running backs can last that long. I mean,
that's right.
I can think of other running backs at that weight, and the closest one I can think of is Darren Sproles. Very small, but
now,
he can.
But see the difference between Sproles. Sproles was like 190. Like Warwick Dunn, those guys were 190. There's a big difference from 170 to 185, 190. See, so but as far as the weight, there weren't many, if any. I would love to look back and see. But based on what my looking back, because I've looked back at times, and I said, dang, I'm 185, 89 today. Boy, I wish I'd have had that weight back then. It's a big difference.
Yeah, it sure is, man. But hey, I appreciate you on the show, and thank you for the memories, man. Like being part of the Super Bowl during '94. I know this was part of the last time we've ever won a Super Bowl, but hey, at least you were a part of that team. At least you were contributing and doing everything, man.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it, and I'll tell you what, man, we got some of the most faithful fans out there. I've gone to games my career, even this year and last year, and I am telling you, I have been totally shocked and surprised how well the 49er empire, the 49er faithful, how these fans travel. And I'm talking about this every week. It's not just going to Los Angeles and we potentially having more fans than they have. They travel well, and I appreciate all their support then and now.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, man. And yeah, like when you in Georgia, they went to that Falcons game. They were full out there.
Oh, no doubt about it, man. I was there, and I witnessed it. I've gone to Jacksonville, and we outnumbered the Jacksonville fans. I've gone to Carolina Panthers, and we outnumbered. It's just unbelievably shocking, pleasantly shocking, that the 49ers don't have to worry about, fans following them. They're going to follow.
Yeah, they're going to follow despite whatever happens. But this team is built they're winning, so they're actually doing something right. Like, it's just, you get those loyal fans, and if they travel well, it's like a home game.
That's right. It's a big difference, man. So thank y'all.
Oh, yeah, man. And thank you for your time. Definitely maybe down the road, I'll get you back on the show, man. It's an honor to meet a legend of your caliber, man. I mean, meeting the legends like you and Roger Craig is heartwarming just to meet you guys as great human beings, man.
Awesome. I appreciate you, man. Stay in touch.
All right, man. And as always, guys, CG Ruthless and Dexter Carter is out. And thank you guys for tuning in. And as always, go Niners.
Go Niners.